Hi guys, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss the answers on the exercises on risk and returns. So we will begin with the first question. Number one, an investment in a common stock with high risk will have A or an A, lower than average expected return, B, lower value than an asset with low risk, C, predictable expected rate of return, and D, higher standard deviation of returns than assets with low risk. The correct answer is letter D, higher standard deviation of returns than assets with low risk. Note that when we talk about risk is the probability that a deviation will happen from expectation. What we expect, as depicted in this green line, may not materialize in reality. It can go higher, as in the yellow line, or lower than our expectation. Standard deviation is the way of measuring such a deviation. So when we calculate the standard deviation, the higher it is, the more volatile actual returns may become relative to the expected returns, meaning what we expect will not necessarily materialize. Question 2 is about comparing the relative riskiness of two investments. Number 2, a company uses the coefficient of variation to compare the risk and returns of investment projects. The expected returns and standard deviations of returns for the Ruby project and the Gem project are shown below. So we have the expected returns 10% for Ruby and 12% for Gem. Standard deviation 40% for Ruby and 54% for Gem. The company's personnel would most likely evaluate the riskier project to be. Although standard deviation measures the volatility of returns relative to expectation, we cannot simply compare the standard deviations of these two investments. Why? Although it's evident that GEM's standard deviation of 54% is higher than Ruby's 40%, the fact remains that GEM's expected return is also higher, 12% versus Ruby's 10%. Again, GEM may have a higher standard deviation, but GEM also has a higher rate of return. To make the two comparable, what we can measure is the risk per rate of return. The risk being borne by the investor by owning one of these investments relative to the percentage returns that it is expected to provide. So what we can do here is to divide the standard deviations of the two investments, Ruby and Gem, with 40% and 54% respectively, by the expected return of each of these investments, 10% and 12% respectively. We call this the coefficient of variation. So when we are going to compare the relative riskiness of two investments, especially with different expected returns, we have to calculate the coefficient of variation. Ruby's coefficient of variation is 4, while Gem's is 4.5. Meaning for every rate of return expected from Ruby, the investors carry 4 standard deviations, while for Gem, every percentage rate of return expected from it, the investors carrying 4.5. Meaning to say, Gem is relatively riskier with more standard deviations per rate of return. So the correct answer here would be letter B. Gem is the riskier project because its coefficient of variation is 450, higher than that of Ruby. Let us now proceed to another type of risk. So far in our discussion, we have been considering the risk of a single investment in isolation, meaning we assume that the investor is holding only one investment. What if the investor is holding multiple investments? He or she created a portfolio of investments. some of the risks that we have talked about will no longer be relevant. Why? By holding more than a single investment, some of the risks of these investments may offset one another. An event that may be favorable to one stock may be to the detriment of the other, and vice versa. So again, some of the risk would offset one another. As a result, the overall risk that the investor would carry will be lower, as depicted in this graph. The more stocks being held in a portfolio, the level of risk goes down. The level of risk that can be eliminated by this process, which we call diversification, holding more than one investment, we call them diversifiable or non-systematic risk. Such type of risk is irrelevant in our next questions. However, what remains is what we call the market or systematic risk, which will always be there whether you diversify your portfolio or not. Meaning, whether you're going to hold only one investment or hold multiple investments, market risk will never go away. It is inherent in the market. Let us proceed to the next question. Number three, what does the systematic risk explain? So the correct answer for this question is letter A, why stock values tend to move in the same direction. As I have told you, systematic risk is risk inherent in the market. After diversification, this still remains. To fully understand what this systematic risk means, I want you to imagine the following graph. So let the green line be the movement of the overall stock index. So as you can see here, it is volatile. Day 1 to day 2, it went higher. Day 2 to day 3, it went lower. And day 3 to day 4, it went lower again. Now, by definition, the stock index, which is the green line in this case, will always have a beta equal to 1. The overall market, by definition, should have a beta equal to 1. So how are we going to make a assessment on the market risk being possessed by a particular investment? We are going to use the stock market index as the benchmark. If we are going to look at the yellow line, the increase in day 1 and the decreases in day 2 and day 3 are not as volatile. They are relatively steadier compared to the overall market. This is a situation where the stock's beta is less than 1. On the other hand, as you can see in the green line, the movement of the stock price is more volatile than the overall market. This is a situation where beta is greater than 1. So, let us answer the following questions. Number 4. The market risk of an individual stock is measured by, again, we use the term beta to measure such a volatility. The technical definition of beta is letter B. It is the covariance between the stock's return and the overall market. That is the correct answer for number 4. Number 5, beta or the sign beta, the Greek letter, is best described as the letter B again. Stock's returns sensitivity to changes in the market's return. The more volatile the stock is compared to the overall market, the higher the beta. Number 6, in using the capital asset pricing model or CAPM, the beta coefficient of an investment that has the same systematic risk as the overall market, this is equal to, so this is the covariance between the stock's return and the overall market, the stock having the same volatility as the overall market. So that would give you a covariance of 1. Again, when we talk about the overall market, its beta is equal to 1. Then here in number 7, based on the following information about stock price increases and decreases, make an estimate of the stock's beta. July, the stock increased by 1.5%. The market went up 1.7%. August, the stock went up by 2%. The market went up 2.4%. September, the stock went down 2.5%. The market went down by 3%. As you have noted, the market is more volatile compared to the stock. The stock's decrease and increase in value is not as variable as that of the market. The increases and decreases are relatively milder. We can therefore conclude that the stock's beta in this 3-month period would be less than 1. So the correct answer is letter B. Now, what if we want to know the beta of the overall portfolio? This is actually a simple calculation. All we have to do is to take the weighted average of the betas of its individual components. Number 8, the diverse company has invested 40% of the firm's assets in a project with a beta of zero point 0.4 and the remaining assets in a project with a beta of 1.8. What is the beta of the firm? All we have to do is to take the weighted average. The beta of the firm, which we can consider a portfolio, beta sub P, is equal to the beta of the first asset multiplied by its relative weight plus the beta of the rest of the assets, beta sub 2, times their relative weight. We would have the following: zero point 0.4 times 40% plus 1.80, the remaining would be 60%. This would give you a portfolio beta of 1.24. So overall, the firm has a beta of 1.24. So that would conclude our discussion to the answers on the exercises. Thank you for listening and see you soon.
Thank you for watching. Comment for the future topics that you would like to request. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you like this video and hit the subscribe and notification bell to be updated for future videos.